Welcome, guys, to another midnight story. But tonight is not like the others. You shouldn't have come here. The shadows are watching your every step. The wind whispers secrets you were never meant to hear. Every creak, every rustle could be your last dot. Do you feel it? The darkness moving? Just behind you. Welcome to the Midnight Story.
Story 1. The woman beside the closed gas station I'd been driving since early afternoon, trying to make it to Boone before dark, but a wrong turn outside of Winston-Salem had me winding through back roads I didn't recognize. My gas light blinked sometime after 10 p.m., and I hadn't seen another car in almost an hour. I pulled off at the next sign I saw, an old rusted marker that read Craden Hollow to Michoud. It wasn't on my GPS, but I figured any place with a name had to have a gas station. I followed the narrow road through thick woods, headlights cutting through a tangle of black branches and fog. I kept telling myself it was just the back roads playing tricks on my mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched from the trees. The town, if you could even call it that, appeared all at once. No welcome sign, no streetlights. Just a cluster of dark shapes slumped along a cracked road. The gas station sat near the end, a squat building with peeling white paint and a single flickering bulb hanging from the overhang. The pumps were rusted solid, their glass faces busted out. I parked anyway, figuring someone inside might know where I could fuel up, but there was no inside. The windows were blacked out, boarded in places, and the door was bolted shut with a rusted chain. I was about to back out when I saw her. She was standing beneath the awning, directly under the light. I hadn't seen her at first. She wasn't there when I pulled up. Long, dark hair clung to her shoulders, wet or maybe just heavy with grease. Her skin looked grey-blue under the light. No shoes, no movement, just staring right at me. I rolled down my window about halfway. "Ma'am, you all right?" She didn't blink, didn't nod, just stared with this hollow kind of focus that made my gut twist. Her eyes didn't follow me when I leaned over the passenger seat to look closer. They were already locked exactly where I'd be, like she'd seen me before I got there. I backed out slowly at first. I didn't want to spook her. Maybe she was in shock or lost, or something worse. But as I turned the car around, I checked the mirror. She was walking, barefoot, slow. Straight down the middle of the road. Her arms hung limp at her sides, swaying just slightly with each step. I hit the gas. When I looked again, she hadn't changed pace, but somehow she was closer. The next time, she was gone, just vanished into the dark. I kept driving, faster now, my knuckles white on the wheel. The road out of Croydon Hollow twisted like a snake, every corner tighter than the last. I never saw a sign for the highway, just empty roads and woods so thick they looked like walls. I passed a broken-down trailer half swallowed by kudzu, then nothing for miles. About 40 minutes later, I saw real light. A lit-up gas station, one with a working sign and a couple of trucks parked outside. Civilization. I pulled in, shaking, half out of breath. My tank was almost bone dry. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when I came in. Young guy, headphones in, flipping through his phone. I walked over to pay, trying to play it cool. "You know a place called Croydon Hollow?" I asked. He looked up, slowly, like I'd pulled him out of a trance. "Why?" he said. He didn't ask where it was, just, "Why?" I stopped there. The place looked abandoned, except there was this woman, standing outside the gas station. Wouldn't talk, just stared at me. His face was drained of color. The kind of pale that doesn't come from fear exactly, but from knowing. He stared at me for a long time before speaking again. "Is she still standing there?" I didn't know what to say. I nodded, slowly. He swallowed hard and looked away. "Folks round here don't stop in Croydon Hollow no more. Not for a long time. I asked him why, asked who she was. All he said was, "Ain't my story to tell." I slept in my truck in that parking lot, left the engine running all night. I'd planned to keep driving, but I couldn't bring myself to go back out there in the dark. When I woke up at dawn, there was dirt on the driver's side door. A single barefoot print on the glass. It wasn't mine. Story 2, The Boy on the Foggy Overlook. I'd been driving since noon that day, heading back from a cousin's wedding in Kentucky, the kind where everyone drinks too much, and nobody remembers what the argument was about by morning. I wanted the long way home, mountain roads, peace, no damn traffic. There's something about those winding roads through Virginia that's comforting when the sun's still out. But by the time I crossed into Grayson County, night had swallowed everything. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, just the occasional scatter of animal eyes catching my high beams from the woods. I was fighting heavy eyelids when I saw the Overlook sign, just a wooden post with a hand-painted arrow. Raven's Reach, Overlook, 0. I figured I'd stop for a minute, stretch, maybe catch some air. I'd seen that name before, on an old map my grandfather kept in his glove box back in the day. Thought it might be a nice little break. The turnoff was gravel and barely wide enough for a truck. Trees hemming me in on both sides until they suddenly gave way to open air. The Overlook sat on a cliff edge, a wooden guardrail wrapped halfway around a slab of concrete just big enough to park on. The valley below would have been beautiful if not for the fog, which had rolled in so thick I couldn't see 10 feet ahead. It wasn't there when I turned in. It just appeared. I stepped out and lit a cigarette. The silence hit me harder than I expected. Not peaceful, not quiet, just dead. No wind, no birds, no hum of bugs. I'd grown up around these parts, quite never felt like that. I was halfway through my smoke when I heard a knock. Not a loud one, soft, like fingertips brushing the driver's side window. I turned fast, heart punching my ribs, expecting to see an animal or maybe a ranger checking in. Instead, I saw a boy, couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, standing there, soaked from head to toe. His hair clung to his face, and his clothes looked too big, like they'd been handed down a few too many times. But it wasn't just that he looked wet, it was how still he was. He didn't fidget, didn't blink. He just looked up at me through the glass and said, "Have you seen my mother?" I froze. There was no car. No sign of headlights. Just the boy, standing in the fog that now curled around my ankles. I stepped closer, trying to keep my voice calm. "Where'd you come from, bud?" He just repeated the question. "Have you seen my mother?" I opened the door, figuring maybe he was lost. Maybe someone had crashed off the road nearby. "You hurt? Are you cold?" I reached out a hand, but he backed away, just a few steps into the fog, and then he was gone, like swallowed. I shouted after him. I walked a few feet out with my phone flashlight, but the fog reflected the light right back at me. I couldn't see anything. My boots sank into wet gravel, the smell of rain and dirt rising with every step. I called out again. Nothing. I got back in the truck, shook off the chill, locked the doors without thinking. I started the engine, turned on the heater. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was just some lost kid who'd run off. Told myself maybe his folks were nearby, but my gut said something else. I turned the truck around and headed back up the road. Took longer than it should have. Every tree looked the same, the road narrower than I remembered. Eventually, I got back to the pavement, turned south. Just needed to put distance between me and whatever the hell that was. 15 minutes passed, then 20. My nerves were finally starting to settle when I checked the rearview mirror. There was a shape in the back seat, not moving, just there, crouched low, arms wrapped around knees. I caught it in a single blink, thinking maybe I was imagining things. I turned around, heart in my throat, flicked the dome light on. The back seat was soaked. damp, like something had been sitting there dripping for a long while, but there was no one there. I pulled off onto the shoulder, jumped out, threw the door open, still empty. The floor mats were muddy. I hadn't been in the back since last week. That smell, wet flannel and stagnant water, lingered thick in the cab. I stood there in the dark, engine running, watching the trees sway without wind. I drove until dawn. When I made it to a diner on the edge of town, the waitress took one look at me and asked if I was all right. I told her the story, left out the weird parts, just said I saw a kid alone on the mountain. She stopped pouring my coffee and asked where. When I told her, she went quiet. "That overlook ain't on no map," she said. "It was shut down years ago. The slide took half the mountain with it. They never fixed the road." I pulled out my phone to show her the pin, but it was gone. No record of Raven's Reach, just a blank spot on the map. She left the coffee and walked off without another word. I sat there in that booth for a long time, longer than I should have. The weight of something still sitting in the back seat pressed behind my ribs, like I hadn't really left that place at all. And sometimes, when I drive at night and the fog starts rising up from the ditches, I check the mirror. More often than not, I find myself too afraid to look. Story 3. The radio station that wasn't there. It was supposed to be a simple detour, a long drive down from Asheville to meet a friend in Hendersonville, but traffic on the main highway was backed up for miles after a wreck near Bat Cave. I figured I'd shave off some time by cutting through the back roads. My dad used to take us through those hills when I was a kid. He said the real North Carolina wasn't found on highways, but the roads no one talks about, the ones you have to squint to even find on a map. I always thought he meant it like a compliment. That night, I started to wonder if it was a warning. I must have taken a wrong turn outside of Ottawa. I hadn't seen a gas station or another car in over an hour. My phone had dropped signal miles back, so I turned on the FM radio for some kind of company. Nothing but static at first, that hollow kind that feels like it's chewing on the air. I kept twisting the dial anyway. I was maybe half a second from switching it off when a voice broke through, smooth and clear like it was sitting right beside me. "If you're on Route 63 near Cold Hollow, please turn around." My hand froze on the dial. I hadn't heard the name Cold Hollow in years. Not since my dad muttered it once in passing and then changed the subject so fast it made me forget I'd asked. I glanced out the windshield. Sure enough, a weather-worn sign on the right side of the road read, RT63, Cold Hollow. I blinked, double-checked the GPS. Nothing. It still had me hovering on a grey line with no route name, just a blinking blue dot floating in nowhere. I pulled over, heart thudding. Something about the way that voice had said, "Please turn around." It wasn't frantic or loud. It was calm, even kind. But it chilled me more than if someone had screamed. Then came the music. An old gospel hymn started playing through the static. "Come, ye sinners, poor and needy." I hadn't heard that song since I was a kid in church with my grandmother, and even then, it always gave me a strange feeling, like it wasn't meant for the living. I cut the engine and listened. No other sounds, no crickets, no trees rustling. Even the air outside the window felt wrong, heavy, like it was holding its breath. I checked my phone again, still no signal. I rolled the window down a crack. The hymn was drifting through the trees now, like it wasn't just on the radio, but outside the truck, somewhere in the hills. I couldn't explain it. It didn't echo, it didn't bounce. It just was. I told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe some local station trying to be creepy, or some old signal bouncing around through the mountains. I tried starting the truck again, but the engine didn't catch, just a weak churn. I turned the key again, same thing. That's when the voice came back. "They don't want you past mile marker 12. I looked up. headlights barely cutting into the fog that had crept in without warning. I hadn't noticed it before, but the marker ahead, half buried in weeds, read 11. I've always trusted my gut. That night, it screamed at me. I got out, popped the hood. Nothing obviously wrong, but the battery looked wrong. Not dead, drained, like something had pulled it dry all at once. I slammed it shut, turned around, and I swear, for half a second I saw a man standing at the tree line across the road. Just a figure, tall, hunched a little, face too dark to see. When I blinked, he was gone. I got back in the truck, locked the doors, and just sat there. I don't know how long I waited. Might have been minutes, might have been an hour. Eventually the engine turned over like nothing had happened. I threw it into gear and backed up, turning around right there in the middle of the road. As I passed that mile marker again, I swear I saw something scratched into the metal beneath the numbers, something deep and angry. I didn't stop to read it. I drove until I hit a ranger station just after sunrise. The place looked like it had been there since the 60s, peeling paint, crooked steps, one guy in uniform sipping coffee behind a desk that probably hadn't been moved in decades. He looked up as I walked in, eyes tired but alert. "You all right?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I told him. All of it. The voice on the radio, the hymn, the figure in the woods. His face didn't change until I said the name, cold, hollow. He set his coffee down and leaned forward. "Where exactly were you?" I showed him the route on my phone, or tried to. The map wouldn't load, no history, no pins. Like I'd never been there, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I'd imagined the road sign, maybe exhaustion was playing tricks. But then I mentioned the voice again. "You said it came through the FM?" he asked. I nodded. He stared at me for a long time. Then he said, "That tower's been gone for 30 years. Lightning took it out. The whole station burned to the ground in 91. Ain't been a signal out of there since." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. We both sat there for a long time, neither of us looking at the other. Eventually he stood and said, "Best you don't go looking for it again." I took the long way home, haven't touched an FM dial since. And sometimes, late at night, if I pass through certain parts of the mountains, I swear I can still hear that hymn. Faint, like it's bleeding through the air itself. And I don't know who they are. I don't know what's waiting past mile marker 12, but I believe they don't want us finding out. Story 4. The car with no driver. I just crossed into Tennessee near Roan Mountain when I first noticed it. A black Oldsmobile, early 90s model if I had to guess. I hadn't seen it pull onto the road, and I'd been watching. That stretch of Route 143 is nothing but tight curves and thick woods pressing in from both sides. You don't miss much out there, but somehow it was there. 2 car lengths behind me, headlights dull and yellow, hugging every turn I took. I figured it was just someone local taking the mountain slow, so I sped up a little. The Oldsmobile matched me, exactly. It didn't take long for it to feel wrong. Every curve, every dip. I adjusted speed, and so did they. No variation. Not once. It was like being shadowed by my own reflection. I tapped the brakes, slowed to a crawl. The car behind me eased up, matching again. No honk, no pass. Just a quiet, perfect echo. I tried not to let it get in my head. There were odd folks in the hills. You learn to shrug it off. Still, when I spotted the old diner with the big red neon eat sign blinking through the trees, I pulled in without thinking. Gravel crunched under my tires. I parked near the front window where I could keep an eye on the road. The Oldsmobile passed by, just cruised slowly. I caught a flash of the front end as it drifted around the bend, but still, no sign of a driver. The windshield was too dark, like it had been blacked out from the inside. Inside the diner, it was quiet. Old-timers hunched over pie and weak coffee. Nobody looked up. The waitress, name tag said Darla, poured me a cup before I even asked. Heading up or down? She asked without smiling. Down, I said, toward Elk Park. She nodded like that meant something. You passed that black car? I paused, the handle of my cup halfway to my mouth. Yeah, I said. You know who's driving it? She didn't answer, just poured more coffee and walked away. I sat there a good half hour, ate some eggs, watched the headlights of passing trucks in the window's reflection. Didn't see the Oldsmobile again. I started to think maybe I'd just been spooked. It happens out here. Something about long stretches of night and nothing but trees makes your brain invent shapes where there ain't any. I paid and stepped outside. The air smelled like damp pine. I was reaching for my keys when I heard tires rolling over gravel. The Oldsmobile, right at the edge of the lot. It had circled back. I watched as it coasted to a stop facing me, maybe 20 yards away. No headlights, no sound except the low idle of the engine. The windows were still pitch black, the kind of tint that's not legal anymore. I couldn't see a damn thing inside. I waited. So did the car. I walked toward it. Slow, careful. My boots crunched louder than I expected. When I got close enough to see the driver's door, I saw it was cracked open. Not swinging, just barely ajar. The engine is still running. I leaned in, no one inside. I looked again. The seat was empty. No keys in the ignition. And yet, the engine was humming steady, like it belonged to someone still behind the wheel. I backed away, skin crawling. I reached for my phone, but of course, no bars. I turned to go back inside, maybe call the sheriff from the landline. When I turned around again, the car was gone. No sound, no taillights, no engine fades. It just wasn't there anymore. I ran to the edge of the lot, checked the road in both directions. Nothing. The only thing left behind was a thin pair of tire tracks that led onto the asphalt and stopped halfway through the road. Not a skid, not a turn. It just ended. I didn't sleep that night. Sat up in the motel outside of Elk Park with the curtains drawn and the lights off. Every time a car passed, I peeked through the blinds. Kept expecting to see those dull yellow headlights creeping along the shoulder. A few days later, I told a local mechanic about it, hoping he'd say something rational, some trick of the light, some old drunk who leaves his car running. He just said, "You saw it too, huh?" Then he told me the story. Back in '93, a man named Everett Lowry ran a mechanic shop out of Banner Elk. Nice guy. Had a black Oldsmobile, same kind. Drove it every day until the day he didn't come home. Folks say he was headed to pick up his boy from a cabin near Roan Mountain. Somewhere along the way, he disappeared. The car too. They found the kid waiting on the porch. Said his daddy never came. The search party never found anything. A couple weeks later, a woman claimed she saw Everett's car pacing her down the highway. No driver, just following. Then it was a trucker. Then a preacher. Same car, same road, no driver, always gone before anyone could do more than blink. Sometimes it shows up when folks take that road alone, the mechanic said. Sometimes when they ain't got no business going where they're going, like it's checking in on them or warning them. I asked if it ever did more than follow. He looked out the window like he was remembering something. Only once, he said. A man ignored it. Passed it, tried to wave it off. Next morning, his truck was found turned over in a ditch near mile marker 7, doors locked from the inside, driver gone, no footprints, just tire tracks in the dirt, same pattern, stopped halfway and vanished. I never took that road again, but some nights, on back roads way out in the quiet hills, I see headlights in my rearview mirror, too dim, too steady. I speed up, they keep pace. I slow down, so do they. I've gotten good at not looking too long. Good at turning down roads, I don't know, just to shake the feeling. But the worst part? Sometimes I come home and find fresh gravel dust on my back bumper, and I know I haven't driven that far. Not alone, anyway. Story 5, mile marker 211, has no exit. I've driven the same stretch of highway between Knoxville and Asheville more times than I can count. My folks live out in Henderson County, and with work keeping me grounded in Tennessee most weeks, those weekend drives were a ritual. Always the same route, always the same stops. I knew the mile markers like the back of my hand. That night, I was running behind. I'd left Knoxville later than I meant to, got caught up at the shop, and by the time I hit I-40 East, it was pushing midnight. The roads were quiet, just the occasional semi rolling by, lights in the dark. I had the windows cracked, cool mountain air drifting in, old country playing soft on the radio. That kind of drive where the mind slips into rhythm, mile by mile, marker by marker. I passed marker 203, then 205, then came 208, and then, out of nowhere, I saw something new. Mile marker 211, Arrow Ridge exit. I blinked, slowed down. I knew 211 didn't have an exit, not ever. That stretch ran along a ridge too steep to build anything on, far as I knew. But sure enough, the green reflective sign glowed in my headlights, and there it was, a gently curving off-ramp leading down into trees. No lights, no guardrail, just fresh blacktop. It looked new. I figured it was a new state road, maybe not even on GPS yet. Could be a shortcut, or even just something scenic that had saved me from the switchbacks closer to the border. So I took it. The moment my tires left the interstate, everything changed. The blacktop was pristine, no cracks, no painted lines. The woods on either side rose up steep and tight, like the road had been carved through a gash in the hills. My headlights barely reached the trees. No signs, no turnoffs, just curve after curve. It felt wrong in my bones, but I told myself it was just unfamiliarity. Keep driving. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Still no signs, no mailboxes, no lights in the distance. I glanced at my phone. No signal, not even a bar. GPS frozen on a blue dot floating in grey space. My stomach started to twist a little. Something in me said to turn back, but there was nowhere to do it. No shoulder, just steep banks on either side. After about 45 minutes, I started to feel like I was going in circles. The trees looked the same. The curves, the angles, they started to repeat. I slowed down, creeping along until I saw something up ahead. Another sign. Mile marker 211, Arrow Ridge exit. I stopped the car in the middle of the road and stared. It was the same exact sign, not a duplicate, the same rust spot on the edge, same dent at the bottom. I hadn't taken a loop. I'd gone forward for nearly an hour. But somehow I was back where I started. I sat there with the engine idling. The music had cut out a while ago, just soft static humming through the speakers. I checked the dash clock. 4:12 a.m. I picked up my phone, still dead. But the screen showed something strange. 1:48 a.m. I refreshed it. Nothing changed. The phone was stuck. I threw it in the seat and made a U-turn right there. Told myself I must have missed a turn, that there had to be some kind of loop road. Maybe a ranger access or some maintenance road not on the maps. I drove back the way I came, only this time the road didn't feel the same. The trees were closer, the turns are sharper. I passed a dead deer on the side of the road, bloated, covered in flies. But its eyes looked wrong, glassy but wide open, like it had seen something before it died. I drove another 40 minutes, half expecting to end up back at that same damn sign. Instead, I came to a clearing. A wide shoulder opened up to a wooden overlook. Just a rail and an old bench facing a drop into the black valley. I pulled over, stepped out. The air smelled stale, like something old had been sitting there a long time. The woods were too still, not quiet, just waiting. As I leaned against the rail, I heard something in the trees. Not footsteps, more like dragging. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I called out, thinking maybe someone else had gotten lost out there too. No answer. I waited, heart in my throat. The sound stopped. When I got back in the car, the interior lights wouldn't come on. I flipped the switch a few times. Nothing. Everything felt a few degrees colder than it had before. I turned the key. The engine started, but the dash lights flickered, then held. The clock still said 4:12. My phone was still frozen at 1:48. I started driving again. It didn't matter where. I just wanted out. Eventually, I saw lights. Real ones. Warm, yellow, and flickering like candles. A small building came into view. Looked like an old ranger station or service cabin, tucked behind a gravel lot. I pulled in, nearly crying with relief. Knocked on the door. No answer. I peeked through the window. Shelves of dusty books. A fireplace burned down to embers. A cup of coffee is still steaming on the desk, but not a soul in sight. I backed away and turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. The same blacktop road leading away from the lot. Mile marker 211. Arrow Ridge exit. It was there too, as if the road had moved with me, folding in like a shadow. I drove. No other choice. But this time I kept an eye on the rear view. For a long time there was nothing but fog. Then, just barely, headlights appeared. Distant, faint. I thought maybe someone else was behind me, lost like I was. But they never got closer, never fall behind. Just hovered, two pale orbs floating in the mist. When I finally saw the green glow of the main interstate up ahead, I didn't believe it at first. It wasn't until I pulled up to the ramp and saw the wide stretch of familiar asphalt that I knew I was out. I merged, heart pounding. The clock on my dash ticked to 4:13. I reached for my phone. This time, the signal bar came back. But the time still said 1:48. To this day, it only ever shows 1:48 when I'm near the mountains. Even if the signal is full, battery charged, it's like something still hangs on. I've never found Arrow Ridge on any map. Asked a few locals, no one's heard of it. Some laugh it off, others just go quiet. I don't take that stretch of road anymore. Don't trust exits I don't recognize, especially not ones near mile marker 211. Because the thing I remember most now, more than the silence, more than the signs, more than the dragging in the trees, is how the road never ended. It just folded, pulled me back in, and I still wonder sometimes if I ever really left. Or if I'm just somewhere after that road, and time's still trying to figure out where to put me. Story 6, The Old Man with the Lantern. I was coming down from Boone on one of those early October nights when the air smells like wood smoke and rot. The kind of chill that creeps in under your coat and sits in your bones. I'd been up that way helping my uncle clear out his tool shed. He's got bad knees now and worse memory, so half the job was figuring out what he'd forgotten he still owned. I left just before sunset, trying to beat the dark before the back roads got too hard to see. I took Route 602, same as always, twisting a little stretch of road between Meat Camp and Todd, full of dips and blind turns and patches of asphalt so rough you feel every seam in your spine. There's a stretch folks out there call the Disappearing Mile, maybe a mile and a half long, surrounded by forest so thick it eats headlights. Nobody ever fixes it for long. Pavement goes down, cracks through within weeks. It's not on any map, but everyone knows where it is. My truck gave out right in the middle of that stretch. 1 second everything's fine, and the next, dead. No warning, no sputter, just silence. Engine lights all blinked off. I turned the key a few times. Nothing, not even the whine of the starter. Radio died too. I checked my phone, but there wasn't a single bar. No cars in sight, just woods and the dark crawling in. I popped the hood, not that I'd know what I was looking for. Steam or smoke, maybe. There wasn't either. Everything under the hood looked normal. Wires where they ought to be, battery clean. Still wouldn't start. I was just about to climb back in and wait it out when I saw the light. It started deep in the trees. Just a dim flicker at first. Then brighter. A lantern, I realized. Someone was walking toward me holding an old-fashioned kerosene lantern, the kind you only see in antique stores or in barns older than my grandfather. The figure moved slow but steady, the light casting long shadows against the underbrush. When he stepped into view, I saw he was an old man. Not just old like retirement. Old, white beard down to his chest, coat so long it brushed the ground. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, dirty and soft with age, and walked like he'd done it through these woods 1,000 times. "Need some help?" he asked, voice like dry leaves. I hesitated. Everything in me said not to trust it, but I also knew no tow truck would find me out here without a signal, and it was already pushing 9 p.m. "My truck died," I said. "Won't turn over." He nodded, like he already knew. "Ain't the first time something's gone quiet on this stretch." He lifted the lantern and pointed into the woods behind him. "Cabin, not far. Got a stove and a phone. You can wait there while I get someone." I didn't see any other choice, so I followed. We left the road and stepped into the forest. It was immediately colder under the trees, like they trapped the night in their roots. The lantern didn't give off much light, just enough to see a few feet ahead. The ground was uneven, covered in years of fallen leaves and soft mud. The man didn't speak again, and I didn't ask questions. I focused on my footing. Every so often I'd glance around, and that's when I started to notice things. First were the cars. Not many, but enough to make me wonder. Half covered in moss, rusted through, their frames sunk into the earth like they'd been left decades ago. I passed one with its windows gone and a tree growing up through the chassis. Another had a faded bumper sticker from Carter's presidency. None of them looked crashed. Just left. Then came the trees, big oaks, their bark carved with names. Initials mostly, but also dates. A lot of dates. One read 1937, another said June 12th, 1951. Still here. The letters were deep, like whoever carved them wanted to be remembered by the wood. Some were in cursive, others scratched rough like fingernails. "You get a lot of folks through here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "More than you'd think," the old man said, not turning. "Road's always been hungry." I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't want to know. Eventually, the cabin came into view. It was small, sagging slightly on one side, but the windows glowed faintly from inside like there was already a fire going. He stepped up to the porch, creaked the door open, and nodded for me to enter. "Wait here, I'll send someone." Then he vanished into the woods behind the cabin without another word. The inside smelled like cedar and ash. There was indeed a fire, though I never saw fresh wood. Just coals glowing like they'd been burning a long while. A kettle sat beside the hearth, but no stove, no phone either. I checked the corners, lifted the receiver on a wall unit. Dead. Still, it was warmer than outside, and I told myself the man would be back soon. So I waited. An hour passed, then 2. I sat on a crooked chair by the window, listening. At one point I thought I heard something on the roof. Not branches, not rain. Something light, like fingers tapping along the wood. I stayed frozen until it stopped. The clock on the mantel had no hands, just a face. A smile scratched into the wood beneath it. I opened the front door once, just to check. Nothing but dark woods. The lantern was gone. When I finally left, it was because I knew, deep down, that no one was coming. The fire had gone out on its own, and the air had turned bitter. I stepped outside and started walking. No direction. Just away. It didn't take long to find the road again, or maybe it found me. My truck sat right where I left it. Hood down, headlights off. But the engine was running. I opened the door. Keys were in the ignition. Radio playing a low hum of static. I climbed in, hands shaking, and drove straight back to Boone without stopping. A week later, I went back during the day. Couldn't help it. I brought a friend and a map and spent 3 hours walking that stretch of road. No turnoff, no trail, no cabin, no sign anyone had ever cut a path into those woods. But I remember the carved names, the trees' whisper, the man with the lantern who never looked back. Sometimes I think about the fire in that cabin, how it stayed lit long before I got there, and how it died when I stopped believing he'd return. And sometimes, just sometimes, I wonder if that stretch of road ever really let me go, or if it's still waiting for me to come back. Story 7, Something Waited in the Rearview. I was headed down Route 421 toward Mountain City just before dusk. The kind of quiet orange evening where the mountains catch fire with color and the road hums like it's remembering something. I'd taken that route 100 times. Used to live out there for a while when my dad was still hanging on to the family farm. These days, I just pass through. It's a good stretch of road if you like being alone. I was coming from a job in Boone, hauling some spare lumber in the back of my truck, and figured I'd be home by 10. I wasn't in a rush. That was the mistake. The sun dipped fast once I hit the narrow part of the highway that stretches between Zineville and the county line. No streetlights. Just yellow paint worn down to suggestion and trees so close on either side they feel like shoulders pressing in. I cracked the window a bit to let the cold in and kept my hands easy on the wheel, just settling in when I caught movement in the rear view. There was someone walking down the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker. Kind of tall, maybe lanky. Couldn't make out much except a long silhouette in my taillights. What stuck out immediately was how steady they were, walking dead center on the yellow line like it was a tightrope. No stumble, no wave, no thumb out. I slowed a little, just enough to make sure they weren't hurt. But the figure didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge me at all, just kept walking with those slow, long strides. I eased into the next bend and figured I'd left them behind. I even checked my side mirror just to make sure, still there, exactly the same distance back. That was when something twisted in my gut. I tapped the brakes to watch what it would do. It slowed down, matched me. I sped up. It sped up. Didn't run, just stretched. Like the road was moving with it. I hit 60, then 70. Curve after curve, I kept expecting to lose sight of it. But every time I glanced in the mirror, it was there. Same posture, same distance, like it was anchored to my truck. I told myself it had to be a trick of the lights. I'd been working long days, skipping sleep. Maybe it was nothing but shadow and paranoia. Still, I hit 80 around a straight stretch and didn't let up until I was near screaming past the posted signs. When I checked again, it was gone. I exhaled. I felt stupid for getting worked up. Let the speed drop back to normal. That's when I saw it again. Up ahead this time. Standing off to the right side of the road, just past the bend. Not moving. Not walking. Just standing. Same height. Same shape. Arms too long, like they hung a little lower than they should. I felt the wheel jerk under my hands without meaning to, just a small tremor, like something in me didn't want to drive past it. I swerved just a bit wide, eyes straight ahead, refusing to look directly at it. As I passed, I saw, just in the corner of my eye, that it turned its head. No face, just a smear of something pale. I gunned it. Didn't stop for anything, not signs, not calls, not even when I crossed into the next county where the trees finally thinned out and the sky opened again. I felt exposed out there, like I'd carried something with me. The rear view became a weight. I couldn't look at it without expecting to see that shape again, hovering behind me. So I covered it, dug into the glove box, found a strip of duct tape, and stuck it right over the mirror. That made it easier to keep going. I didn't stop until I hit the gas station on the edge of Butler, a bright little spot of civilization tucked behind a diner and a bait shop. I pulled up to pump 5, hands shaking a little as I climbed out. I didn't check the mirror, didn't even glance at the windows, just kept my head down and filled the tank. Inside, the clerk gave me a funny look. Maybe it was the way I kept checking over my shoulder, or the way my hands wouldn't stay still. I grabbed a coffee, paid in cash, and sat in the cab for a while, trying to breathe like normal people do. Finally, I peeled off the duct tape. It came away in a single strip. Clean, but on the inside of the glass, just behind where the mirror had been, was a handprint, not smudged from the outside, not dusty like something brushed against it, but pressed, firm and wet against the inside of the windshield. 5 long fingers, each longer than they should have been. A smear where the palm had dragged slightly downward. No mistaking it. I didn't sleep that night, didn't go home. Just kept driving until the sun rose and the mountains looked safe again. I asked around the next week, talked to a guy who runs a tow service out of Deep Gap. He said folks have reported seeing shapes on that stretch for years. The stories go back to when the road was dirt, when it was barely more than a game trail cut by bootleggers and men who never left the woods again. They say there's something that walks that line at dusk, not every night, just now and then, when the weather shifts, when the light's just right. It doesn't try to stop you, doesn't speak, just watch, follows. He told me the same thing happened to a trucker in '89. Guy stopped in Zionville, white as a sheet. Said he drove 3 counties with his mirror taped up too. They found a handprint in the dust on his dashboard. Same size, same shape. I still take Route 421 sometimes. Old habits die hard, but I don't drive it at dusk anymore, and I never look in the rear view, not unless I have to. Story 8, Detour Through the Hollow. That screams. I was heading back from visiting my sister in Marion, trying to make it home to Elizabethton before dark, but a rock slide near Chimney Rock shut down the main road. State troopers had the whole route taped off and said it'd be hours before the crew could clear it. I didn't want to double back an hour and take the highway, too much traffic, too far out of the way, so I turned off on a narrow back road thinking it might reconnect somewhere near Spruce Pine. Not long after, I saw a sign. Hand-painted, letters crooked and faded, nailed to a post that leaned like it had been hit once and left to rot. It read, Detour Through Croft Hollow. No arrow, just those 4 words, red on white. I knew better. I've lived in the mountains long enough to know that places with names like Croft Hollow don't show up on maps for a reason. Still, I followed it. Maybe it was impatience. Maybe I didn't want to be the kind of man who turned back over a bit of bad paint. Either way, I made the turn. The road dipped almost immediately. Asphalt turned to cracked gravel, then gravel turned to dirt. Trees grew thicker on either side until their branches knitted overhead, cutting out what was left of the sun. I slowed down. Something about the way the trees pressed in made me feel like I was driving through someone else's memory, something private, something that didn't want to be remembered. The air changed, too. It got colder, damp. The kind of cold that soaks through the vents no matter how high you turn the heat. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was wind, long, drawn-out whistles drifting between the trees. But there was rhythm to it, sharp rises and falls, almost like someone trying to catch their breath after screaming too long. It wasn't near, not exactly. It came from around, off the ridges, or down deep hollows where the road sloped too steep for comfort. It didn't stop, just kept going. I kept driving. About a mile in, I passed an old gatepost made of stacked stone, the kind you only find in cemeteries or long-forgotten fields. The wood sign beside it had rotted off, just a few rusted bolts holding nothing. As I passed, my radio, set low on an old country station, cut out and filled with static. Then I heard the same sound through the speakers, the scream, drawn out. But this time, closer. I tapped the brakes and looked behind me. There was no road. I swear on everything I love, I had just driven down a single-lane gravel stretch surrounded by pine and oak. But now, nothing. Just trees, no tracks, no bend in the dirt. Like I had never come from anywhere at all. My heart dropped into my stomach. I threw the truck in reverse, backed up a few feet, thinking maybe the angle was playing tricks. But the more I moved, the deeper I seemed to go. The trees never ended. No gaps, no trail, just more wood. Then I saw her, a little girl, standing dead center in the road ahead, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a pale blue dress that looked too thin for the cold. Her hair hung long and straight, hiding half her face, and her arms were folded behind her back like she was waiting for something. I hit the brakes so hard the truck jolted. I didn't get out. I didn't roll down the window. I just cracked the door and called out, "You all right, sweetheart? You lost?" She didn't move, just tilted her head a little to one side like a bird listening for something. Then she said, clear as day, "It's always screaming. You just don't hear it when you're going the right way." The hair on my arm stood up like it was being pulled. I asked her again if she needed help, but she just walked off the road and disappeared between 2 trees without a sound, not even a crunch of leaves. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to turn around, hit the gas and get away from whatever the hell that was. But there was no place to go. The road ahead dipped again, deeper this time, and I swear the trees leaned in tighter like they were listening. So I drove. The screaming changed, grew layered, sometimes high and sharp, like a child, other times deep and low, like something trapped under the dirt. It didn't come from any one place. It came from everywhere, and it was constant, always rising, always falling, like the hollow was breathing in pain. I saw things on the roadside. An old tricycle, rusted through. A wooden shoe with moss growing out of it. Once, a pickup like mine, half sunken into a ditch, driver's side door wide open, no one inside. I didn't stop. I don't know how long I was in Croft Hollow. My watch stopped ticking halfway through, stuck at 6:23. My phone screen went white. Not dead, just blank, like it didn't want to show me the time. Eventually, the road opened again. I turned a corner and suddenly, light, real light. A crossroads with a stop sign and a rusted-out mailbox. No name on it, but the dirt turned back to gravel, then back to pavement. I merged onto the main road, shaking so bad I could barely keep the wheel steady. The scream stopped the second I crossed back onto asphalt, like someone cut the cord. I pulled off at the first gas station I saw. The clerk asked if I was okay. I told her I got turned around down Croft Hollow. She blinked, slowly, then said, "That ain't a road anymore." I told her I saw the sign. She shook her head and said it was torn down after the fire, back in '94. I don't remember the drive home. For weeks after, I heard that scream in my dreams. Not loud, not the way it sounded in the hollow, just faint, like someone yelling from behind a wall. And I still think about that girl, her words, how you can only hear the screaming when you're going the wrong way. Sometimes when I drive unfamiliar roads and miss a turn, I panic a little, not from getting lost, but from thinking I might hear it again, that awful sound, rising through the trees, waiting. Story 9. He was driving my car. I'd been driving all night, trying to get back to Bristol from Atlanta after my cousin's funeral. I didn't want to stop. Something about the silence after a service makes the road feel heavier. Every turn of the tires just gives you more time to think, to loop through the same memories until they stop making sense. It was a little past 2 a.m. when I crossed north of Cherokee, and I was running low on caffeine and running high on that strange awareness that only shows up past midnight on a mountain road. No cars for miles, just my headlights slicing through the dark and the distant echo of wind shifting through bare trees. There was a rest stop right off the 2-lane, a place I knew from hauling tools through the hills for work years ago. A small place, never more than a bathroom, a vending machine, and an old concrete picnic table out front. I pulled in just to splash some water on my face and stretch my legs. Only 2 vehicles in the lot, mine and a beat-up brown sedan that looked like it hadn't moved in a week. No plates on the front, windows tinted darker than they ought to be. One of those cars that feels watched, even when it's empty. I parked a few spaces over, left the engine running. Just figured I'd be in and out. Took my wallet and phone, left everything else behind. Backpack, charger, even my jacket still draped over the passenger seat. It was cold out, but not enough to matter. The bathroom lights buzzed overhead, and the sink dribbled more than poured. I leaned in, splashed water on my face, stared at myself in the mirror longer than I meant to. My eyes looked strange, not tired, just unfamiliar. When I walked back out, my car was gone. It was just gone. I stood in the middle of the parking lot like an idiot, spinning in slow circles as if it had somehow moved itself to another row. The only vehicle there now was the old brown sedan, still parked, still silent. My car was there. I know it has. At first I thought maybe someone had hot-wired it. A car thief or a drifter sleeping in the woods. I fumbled my phone out and dialed 911. My voice cracked when I explained, and the dispatcher didn't help much. Told me to stay put, that a cruiser would be there in 15, the longest 15 minutes of my life. I stood under the street lamp outside the restroom and kept my eyes on that sedan. It never moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had something to do with it, like it had swapped places with my car when I wasn't looking. The cops showed up at just under 20, 2 deputies, one younger, one older, both tired looking. I ran up to them and spilled the whole story. They took it seriously enough, asked for ID, asked me to walk them through what happened again. Then the older one put a hand to his earpiece and nodded slowly. "Sir," he said, "we've just intercepted a vehicle about 5 miles up the road. It matches your description. We'd like you to come with us." I got in the back of their cruiser. They didn't cuff me or anything, but I could feel their eyes on me the whole ride. We turned off about a mile later and pulled into a gas station. My car was there, parked at pump 4, lights off, windows fogged just slightly. A man stood beside it, wearing my jacket, carrying my backpack. He looked up as we pulled in, and I swear to God, it was me. Not similar. Not, "This guy could be your cousin." Me. Same face, same haircut, even the way he stood, shoulders slightly forward like he was always bracing against wind. The deputies got out slowly, hands near their belts, telling him to stay put. He didn't run, just stood there, smiling. I got out, legs numb, and the younger deputy held a hand up to stop me. "Stay by the car," he said. The man who looked like me didn't say anything until they had him seated on the curb. Then he looked right at me and said, cheerful as could be, "Hey, took you long enough." My stomach flipped. They found my wallet in his pocket, my license, everything down to my receipts and old gas station punch card. He even knew my address, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. When they asked him why he took the car, he said, "It was mine already." The dashcam footage was worse. The older deputy pulled me aside at the station later that morning, after I filled out forms and gave my statement 3 different times. He looked pale, held up the screen and played it back for me in silence. I watched myself get out at the rest stop, saw the car sitting there, lights on. Then, from the passenger side, the door opened. But I hadn't opened it. Something slid out, crawled out almost, stood up into the frame, and it was me. Same clothes, same everything. The real me, watching from the driver's seat, never noticed a thing. The copy just stood up, walked around, and got in behind the wheel, drove away. The timestamp never skipped. There were no edits. The deputies didn't have answers. They kept him overnight for questioning, but by morning he was gone. Slipped the cuffs, they said. Left everything behind, even the jacket. All the footage just showed a shadow moving across the holding cell wall. The door never opened. Guards never saw a thing. I got my car back. It still smells like me. Still plays my saved playlists. But there's this thing I can't stop thinking about. What if it never left? What if it's still in there? Some part of it, watching me from the back seat, waiting for me to forget. To stop checking the mirror. To look away long enough for it to climb back into place. Every now and then, when I drive through quiet parts of the mountain roads, I catch myself in the mirror. And for a split second, I swear, the man looking back doesn't blink when I do.